Seth Pringle. I'm the director of the Claremont Lewis Museum of Art. And this panel is a collaboration between our museum and CGU Art Department. And it's an extension of, we have the group show that we have at the museum right now is called Complications in Color. And it was in partnership with a Carl Benjamin exhibition that happened at CGU that David curated called It's All About the Benjamins. And part of a larger initiative of exhibitions and events that we've coined Benjamania, celebrating Carl Benjamin's 100th birthday. So yeah, we're here to talk about color and abstraction and SoCal culture. So I'm going to stagger the reading of the bios as we go through a few just like quick slideshows. But I just want to introduce our panelists: Alex Heilbron, David Pagel, Rachel Lachowicz, and Dave Tourje. So let's welcome our panelists. Thank you all for being here. So we're going to just do like quick slideshows for each person so that you can see a little bit more about what their practice has to do with this whole conversation. And then we'll get into discussion panel business. Let me just pull up my notes. So Rachel Lachowicz was born in San Francisco, California, and is currently based in Santa Monica. She received her BFA from California Institute of the Arts in 1984. Her professional history covers over 30 years of conceptual art in making, and her work can be found in the permanent collection of the Whitney Museum, the Israel Museum of Jerusalem, LACMA, MoCA, Los Angeles, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, Orange County Museum of Art, Palm Springs Museum of Art, etc. I had to cut that short a little bit. It goes on and on. She is a recipient of the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Fellowship and the Louis Comfort Tiffany Foundation Award. Rachel is known for turning her witty eye on the masculine-centric world of modernism and for making radical incursions into the canon of art history by reconfiguring famous works. She falls under a multitude of headings: feminist, appropriationist, post-minimalist, conceptual artist, and conceptual sculptor. Labels aside, her work contributed to a groundbreaking reconceptualization of the feminist position. The term lipstick feminist grew out of an 80s and 90s philosophy, but more specifically, the art world came to use that term to refer to the work of Rachel Lachowicz and less than a handful of others. She explores the relationship of identity and the politics of mark-making, predominantly through use of cosmetics. Lachowicz makes both discrete objects and large-scale installations that are visually lush, at times sexually provocative, and always with a deliberate repurposing of meaning. Rachel is the chair of the art department at CGU with over 20 years of teaching experience at the graduate level and an extensive lecture resume. For 12 years, she was a Santa Monica Arts Commissioner and served on the board of the Santa Monica Arts Foundation and was a member of the Santa Monica Public Art Committee. And if you want to grab one of those, you guys will share your microphones and just make sure it's flipped on there. And I have a couple images of our exhibition at the Lewis Museum of Art, and I meant to just touch on that before I get into Rachel's slides. But basically, we start in hard edge painting with works by Carl Benjamin and a couple of other hard edge painters, June Harwood and Florence Arnold. And we also have works by light and space artist Terry O'Shea. And then that kind of leads us into Rachel's work. So here we have a couple of images of the installation with Rachel's work in the yellow in this image. Oh, and this one, the pink piece is Rachel's with some little Terry O'Shea pieces on the left, some Carl Benjamins and a Florence Arnold. And So now into Rachel's work. So,
Am I talking?
Yeah. So just
Okay.
tell us a little bit about your practice based on the slides. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this on? Am I talking too loud?
Uh,
So this is an old piece older piece from 1992. I started making art out of cosmetics to try to sort of flex a feminist muscle, let's say, using pigments that were for one sphere and dragging and dropping them into an art sphere. And initially I just started purchasing eyeshadows and then making these aluminum frames and gluing them in. And so I was choosing to make a conceptual move, and they are, you could see them as hard-edge color charts, but partly that's because the tin holds the particular color, the cosmetic tin. So each of these have been compressed into a little tin, which has been glued onto a larger substrate. And then later I developed a sort of more advanced practice where I was sort of moving colors in and out of each tin and then making my own pigments. And then I built a whole sort of cosmetic lab and began making all the cosmetics myself. And I found it interesting that people thought, because it was cosmetics, that it was sort of less than or not as good as oil paint. And I said, it is, the lipstick is an oil-based paint, right? It is, it's just really high quality. You can eat it.
Here's the lipstick painting from the show.
So and so that barrier of, that we tend to marginalize through what we put down, and that idea that it was cosmetics was this lowly thing, but I was using that to make a point. So yeah, this is the making of, sometimes I don't know if what I'm going to do is going to work, and most of my work, when it's sort of an event or a performance to sort of get it to happen, I would say. So I cooked up, the front room of my studio was filled with big, huge pots or vats of lipstick, and at first we poured all the lipstick into this metal vat and tried to sort of, and that didn't work, and then later we started pouring it over the paintings. So
you heat it up?
Yeah, so so I had to work for a while there. The cosmetic industry is very private. The chemical compounds, I had to work very hard to sort of figure out how to do what I was going to do. It was like a lot of R&D to get to a point where things would pour, or how to melt it and not burn it, how to get it stable. The first early lipstick pieces, people would touch and then it would get all over the gallery, and it was the sculptures, there were footprints all over. So I had to experiment with different waxes to get it to a stable point, so that I had something that had some longevity, but still made a robust mark.
I was wondering, as I was admiring your pieces in the gallery, did you ever invite people to, kiss your piece and then, they're wearing your piece as lipstick, or is that too on the nose?
I'm like a little bit of a perfectionist, so I don't, each compression for the eyeshadow pieces has a pattern from the compression. Like people that buy cosmetics know that it's like perfect when you open up the container, and then once you start wiping it, cosmetics are made to wipe away, and mine are made to sort of stay. And I don't want to wreck that pattern, which I painstakingly made by hand, right? So, because I now press all my own pigments. And this piece was made by welding together the tins that I used to press in, and then I pressed tins to fill them and glued them on top. So the structure underneath is the same structure that holds the pigment. So I try to stay sort of close to all the necessary elements, so that the materials, let's say the material list is pigment and cosmetic tints, and that's it, right? So no extra substructures. Somehow that's a level of purity to me. Not that I believe in purity, but it's clean conceptually to me.
Cool. Okay, and this is another
So,
eyeshadow.
yeah, this piece was, so the hexagon, is that hexagon? The shape on the blue shape is got a mirrored plexiglass in the back, and then the purple shape is got mirrored plexiglass, but also is filled with violet eyeshadow pigment. And the idea is that when you're looking at these volumes, you see yourself in them. But I began to become sort of an expert, on the compression of these pigments, and I started to realize that some of the pigments don't press the same. And then I was thinking that on a small scale, they must be different shapes, like the green bounces and the blue presses tight. So I researched like the shapes of pigment particles and started a whole series on pigment particles. And the reason why nanopigments are so robust is because there are these octagon shapes. They're constructed, and there's no space between. They're a different Loctite system when they go under compression. So these are all based on enlarged pigment particles, and they're all filled with cosmetics. And I didn't know how to work with plexiglass, and I invited a company to work with me for many, many months, and learned how to sort of become an expert. Anything that I want to make, I like have a little bit of beef with the term craftsmanship, because when you think of craftsmanship, you think of a highly perfected object, but craft implies that it can be messy, sloppy, and not hold to rigid edges. And so I'm an excellent craftsperson, and yeah, that's what those are about. This is called ocularity, and the idea of ocularity is the number, let's say, of people that it would take to clearly see something. And so this has to do, like the mirrored piece, with the idea of collectivity. And the cones and the rods, the way you see color, like I can't remember which one. One only sees in grayscale and the other sees color. So I started with a grayscale in back, and then superimposed the circles of color, sort of mimicking the kind of the physics of how we see.
I think we have some install shots.
Sorry, I'm talking to.
No.
That one of my friends shot those, and I thought it was so great because the people had colorful phones and dresses on. I loved it. And it's like sort of how that's a contemporary museum experience now.
Is that yellow sculpture enamel?
So the yellow sculpture is like the pink one we saw in the beginning. So it's just the eyeshadow tins welded together with no understructure. And then the pan that it's sitting in is a giant pan that I made for dipping lipstick. And after I didn't use it, I hadn't dipped it, and so I decided, I don't need, every piece doesn't need the eyeshadow on that. Why don't I just use it's all the structures that I use to hold cosmetics, sort of put together in a different way. It's called particles, packets of light, and I like the idea that there's no understructure like the particles of light that we see through how we observe the world. And the guys at the powder coaters called it the taco, which I sort of like, oh, you got the taco. because in the way they powder coat
So that's
is
how-
it's a magnetic. I was worried that the welding would all come apart in the powder coating because it goes in an oven to
Right.
bake it. And I said to the guy that owned the place, I'm really glad you didn't end up with a bunch of triangles on the floor. And he goes, yeah, we're really glad we didn't end up with a bunch of triangles on the floor.
Excellent. Well, so we'll move on to Alex next. So this is a view of Alex's paintings are installed at the museum in our 24/7 window galleries.
They look fabulous at night.
Ah!
Let's see. Oh,
There.
hello.
There you go.
Hello.
It takes a second to get on.
Okay.
There you
Oh,
go.
There
I
you
don't
go.
think so either.
Yeah, they look
Quite
good.
good at night.
The photographer, we were working with shot this all at twilight, and I think it looks very fantastic.
the short of it is that
I think this is pretty well first.
Yeah, it keeps going in and out. You just want to use that one.
I don't think it was on.
Okay, I'll just hold this so I feel like I'm talking into something. Thank you. The short of it is, with my work and what I say to people when they want a sort of quick introduction to what I'm doing is that my paintings are patterns that aspire to be people. And I got into making this work through an obsessive interest in looking at early 20th century design movements. There's a lot of images. I sent Seth way too many images. This is a picture of an exhibition I had just closed on Saturday in Los Angeles at As Is Gallery. And this whole exhibition is sort of a culmination of years and years and years of research on early 20th century design movements, primarily in Europe. And my entry into that was thinking through textiles, repetition in textiles, fabrics, the way that people decorated their homes, and especially who would be in those homes would primarily be a woman and middle class woman hosting and sort of existing in this environment. At the same time, I read the story of the yellow wallpaper and which is about this woman who lives in this attic. She's been locked there because she's hysterical, and she starts to see figures and shadows moving through this wallpaper. And I thought, okay, great, I really am interested in obsession, repetition, these spaces that people can exist in, what these environments are like. So I started becoming obsessed with this singular floral motif, which most of the motifs of the work reference. All of my work is made through stencils. It's all acrylic. So when I started making all of this work, my intention was not that it had a digital aesthetic, but it happened. And it's something that I've been interested in and working through. I spend most of my time as I'm making this work on the computer or peeling vinyl off of my paintings. I spend the least amount of time actually painting. The work that you saw before, I've become obsessed, I guess, with figuring out how to use metallic colors, interference, golds on the surface of the paintings in order to create a relief or a visual sort of movement, because a lot of the work that I make is all quite flat and quite graphic. Here, yeah, this is okay, so these paintings, I did a show in Dallas, and so I'm Canadian, but I was born in the Bay Area, so I am American, and with this group of works, I became really interested in the JFK assassination. It was sort of my entry into figuring out what it meant to be American, and I visited the museum, I visited Dealey Plaza, and all of the references of this work came from doing a little bit of research into how Jackie Kennedy redecorated the White House when she was the First Lady, and then I thought, okay, I really have to now reference the assassination. So all of this work in the show, even though it doesn't look like it, is all images from the Warren Report, images from files in the National Archives, and references the color of Jackie's dress, the pattern of the dress that she was wearing. That dress, okay, I'm really into the JFK assassination. Oh, cool, we have a lot to talk about. Is held in the National Archives and will not be released 100 years past the date of the assassination, so no one can see the dress. And there are images of recreations of it. I'm not sure if anyone saw the JFK film with Natalie Portman. There's a dress that she's wearing. Anyway, I became really, really interested in that. We're going sort of backwards with the work. You can keep going. So this is my...
Well, I think that's the end of it.
Oh, that's, okay, great. Anyway, I mean, I didn't mean to end on the JFK assassination.
That's the beginning.
I could talk for hours and hours about that topic. I find it endlessly fascinating, not necessarily figuring out who did it, but more the sort of mania and the fervor that happens when one starts to investigate these online communities or in-person communities of people who are investigating or like getting into these topics. And that goes back to me to this obsession with the repeating patterns. Okay, thank you.
And can you still hear me? There, the mics are going in and out. I realized I forgot to read your bio first. So she's going to edit this and the recording. No, just kidding. But I'm going to finish with Alex's bio here. So Alex is a Los Angeles-based artist whose work explores the conceptual and formal potential of pattern as a reflection of cultural perceptions of femininity. Is that picking up?
No.
Do you want to use this?
I could try it.
You can just project.
Yeah.
Use your outdoor
Okay.
voice.
So she received her BFA from the San Francisco Art Institute, and there's some German words that I'm just going to
I can help you.
stumble through here.
Kunstakademie
Studied at the,
Düsseldorf.
there we go, and earned an MFA from the University of California, Los Angeles. I got that one. Recent solo presentations include As Is Los Angeles, Claremont Lewis Museum of Art, Will Abale, is that right? Oh, okay. Vancouver, and Melixedian, is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
That's fine.
there's some other ones that are even harder. Melixedian, Briggs, Dallas, and Los Angeles. Her work has also been exhibited at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, the Modern Fort Worth, LAX Art, this one, I don't know. Kunstwerk.
Oh, Kunstverein für die Rheinlande und Westfalen Düsseldorf.
What she said. Okay. And the Moscow Museum of Modern Art, Moscow. She received a Paula Krasner grant from 2023 to 2024, the William and Dorothy Yeck Purchase Award in 2020, and the Helen Frankenthaler Scholarship in 2019-2020. She's currently a visiting professor in the art department at Scripps College. Okay. Now, yeah. Thank you for your patience with my out of sequence. And I'm going to lead with bios for Dave and David. Okay, so Dave Tourje. Go back to some Dave images. Okay, so Dave Tourje is a multidisciplined creative, well known in the art world, design and construction industry, as well as the film, music, and production industry, winning numerous prestigious awards nationally and internationally in all of his creative pursuits. In 1999, he co-founded the renowned Chenard Foundation, forming the first public-private partnership for art with the city of Los Angeles. And in 2011, founded the acclaimed art collective known as the California Locos. In 2023, a 432-page coffee book was published in Rome about the Locos. And in 2024, Tourje accepted the prestigious Disruptor of the Year award from the Los Angeles Business Journal. Born in 1960 and raised in Northeast Los Angeles, Glassell Park, Highland Park, Eagle Rock, Tourje's work is a reflection of the multicultural DIY sensibilities of his hometown. His art is known as a contemporary hybrid of low and high art, reflecting his real-life real-life immersion in surf and skate, the LA punk and music scene, graffiti, and other subcultures that grew up and thrived in 70s and 80s Los Angeles. And Dave also lent the Terry O'Shea sculptures to the exhibition, the resin pieces. So you can add that to your list of titles too. It's collector, of course. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't sure what we were going to talk about. I thought we were going to talk about the history of hard edge or something, but I was ready for that. As far as my work goes, the painting stuff, being born in 1960 kind of slotted me, before, I was too young to be a hippie, and so it's kind of this kind of post-hippie thing going into the 70s, and getting into surfing and skateboarding was perfect because the urethane wheel was invented in like 1972, 73, so I got into that whole culture of like skating in swimming pools, surfing. In the 60s, my dad did body work and automotive work, and so I was kind of around, the sort of hot rod culture, slick color, I think got into my system. Crazy stuff like Mad Magazine, Ed Big Daddy Roth, these monsters and different things. That's one of my cars. But I was always an artist. My parents really supported that, and ever since I was a child, I was, drawing or, making art in different ways. But the whole color of the times, having to do with hot rods and guitars and stuff like that, I think got into me at an early age. And then culturally, where I think my age was slotted, with, skateboarding, surfing, and then punk rock in LA kind of entered into the late 70s. And I was playing with guys before the punk scene even existed. So that whole aesthetic, with like, all the punk bands and Raymond Pettibone and all this kind of aesthetic was threading in. I think as I went to art school, and I went to Art Center in UC Santa Barbara, College of Creative Studies, which was kind of a Cal Arts oriented kind of conceptual kind of thing happening at UC Santa Barbara. And that was interesting because I was more thinking in terms of skill-based drawing and, this kind of thing. And then I got totally rearranged in terms of how I viewed visual art. So it became kind of conceptual to me. But, and then I kind of landed, painting with paint exposed didn't move me for some reason. I wasn't good at handling the character of paint itself, I didn't feel. It wasn't lending itself to what I was doing. And I started painting on Mylar in reverse. And I would paint and then I'd flip the Mylar over, and then the stuff started ripping in half. As I got bigger and bigger, it would rip in half, and then finally I got onto acrylic glass, plexiglass, and that's where these come in. And for me, specifically about color, when you reverse paint on a clear material, it's very slick and it's pure color. There's no texture. The paint has, you could say, has no personality other than its color, which is what I liked. And I've been doing that ever since. I have no intention of changing. It just keeps going, and it's a kind of a well that never ends. And I apply different techniques. I use a lot of different materials like spray paint, gold leaf, paintbrush. What else? I do drawings. I stencil, and this is a multi-panel. This is 10-foot tall painting, 10-foot wide. So these are 5 different panels. And that particular evolution occurred because my wife and one of our daughters and I drove across the country one year, many years ago, and we started going into these old antique stores, and I started getting into antique quilts, and it was a very interesting thing because I could see that their considerations on color had nothing to do with knowing color theory. It had only to do with what was next in the bag. And I liked that. It was because it was garish, sometimes it made no sense. Sometimes you'd have 5 panels at the same color and then it would just change. And it's because they weren't thinking. And I liked that. I liked the unthinking of it. And this particular motif of 5 panels, I call them plus signs, I've been doing for quite a while, years and years. And that came from the fact that I had a quilt, all squares of these random colors, and it was on our bed. And it was probably made in the 20s. And I'd walk past it, and this plus sign shape would jump out at me, you know, just randomly. It was like, I'd look at it and I would see that shape. And then I would see the randomness of the color, you know, made no sense. And I liked it. And I started painting bigger and bigger. And so I was in a big modality, and then that happened, and then I was able to go even bigger because, you know, I realized it had to be 5 different panels. So that's what I've been pretty much exploring ever since, but it's this kind of combination of everything I just talked about, kind of including Mad Magazine and everything else, kind of making its way to the picture plane, you could say.
Let's see if so this is the logos, right?
Yeah, that was a show we did in 2017. We included Shepard, Mr. Cartoon, Robert Williams, OG Slick, and Retina into our. That's a film that was made about me in 2011 called LA Aboriginal, and it went around the world, won a lot of awards, and got a lot of attention, and actually got me into film. I'm not really a formal filmmaker, but tagging along with the filmmakers, for me, it seemed like a bit like my practice in painting. And they invited me in to help edit, and I'm a musician as well, so I got into the editing and the audio and the video, and then I got into making films as well, so I've been doing that too.
And then, as I mentioned, Dave lent us these Terry O'Shea pieces to the exhibition, so he's acting as ambassador of Terry O'Shea and the Light and Space. And you know, a lot of people can see light and space coming out of hard edge painting. But yeah, Terry's, I feel like, you know, so the show is called Complications in Color. You know, this panel is called It's Complicated. I like Terry O'Shea's work because there's like his kind of approach, his attitude was a little bit like kind of a trickster or like jester mentality.
Yeah.
So there we have the little capsules, and they're just a few inches high. So these are the zoom in. And then we have the crystal ball, and I have the image of the Surfer magazine, right?
Yeah.
So I'll let you talk about Terry's work a little bit, but that's sorry.
Yeah,
let me go back. There you go.
O'Shea was one of the, I would say, thought leaders of the light and space, and really the Finnish fetish movement. But he was kind of an enigma. So people knew him and didn't know him. But he really was a leader in that, and he produced an amazing body of work. And I mean, how I ended up with basically all of his existing work was his daughter got a hold of me via the Chenard Foundation, and we started talking, and over time we decided to make some kind of a deal with that. She needed help, and I like art, and we like to collect art as well. So I started with the capsules. I ended up with these huge slabs. A lot of the work was tied up, you could say unethically, by certain people. She was really freaked out, and I helped her kind of get the work back for her, and then she ended up selling it to me. But this kind of thing is what I'm talking about that was very real to me growing up. It's that slick finish, beautiful color, kind of random color choices, and that appealed to me. And Seth somehow caught wind that I had some, so he came over and picked some stuff out. As far as the crystal ball, I really like that one because Rick Griffin, the famous psychedelic poster artist, surfer artist, and Terry were very good friends. And Terry made this crystal ball, and so this drawing is a very famous drawing in the history of surf culture. And if you look at the lower right corner, there's a guy holding the ball. That's
I have
Terry
a little
O'Shea.
zoom in. It's not high resolution, but that's the zoom in of it.
So that's Rick Griffin's kind of homage to his buddy. And this crystal ball has this kind of legendary stature. It's like, and I never thought I'd ever see it, but Tara, his daughter, produces the crystal ball. And I'm like, wow, is that available? She's like, yeah, sure. So I ended up with the crystal ball, and it's got this history. Rick had it in his house. I mean, different people would possess it, and it just kind of drifted around. And then Ida Griffin had it for a while, and then I luckily ended up with it. And I have a lot of fun. Sometimes we do panels at like surf museums or surf-related shows, and I bring the ball, and I let people hold it and stuff, and it's a lot of fun.
But not today.
All right, and then so David Pagel curated this. So a quick run at the old CGU art building of It's All About the Benjamins exhibition. So we'll show some images of that. But to introduce David, so David Pagel is an art critic, curator, and professor of art theory and history at CGU, where he has taught since 1994. We were talking about how time flies. His reviews and essays have appeared in the Los Angeles Times, Brooklyn Rail, Art Forum, Art Issues, Flash Art, and Art in America. Recent publications include Broad Reminders, John Sonsini and David Pagel, Jim Shaw, Lund Humphreys, 2019, and Talking Beauty, a conversation between Joseph Raphael and David Pagel about art, love, death, and creativity, Zero Plus Publishing, 2018, as well as monographs on Ted Larson and Augustine Kofi, and catalog essays on Jay DeFeo, Brenda Goodman, Gajin Fujita, and Dion Johnson. Pagel has organized more than 90 exhibitions in the United States, Europe, and Australia, including most recently Brown Lethem, Passion and Paradox, and A Little Night Music, and TBD, Jay Erker, Tony Larson, John Mills, Holly Perez, Marissa Reyes, and Jenny Zayamek. Both of those exhibitions at CGU. Pagel is currently working on a book on Brett Price to be published in 2025. He earned a BA in Modern Thought and Literature with honors and distinction in the humanities from Stanford in 1985, and an MA in Fine Arts from Harvard in '87. He was awarded an Andrew W. Mellon Fellowship in Contemporary Art Criticism in 1990, a McGeorge Fellowship at the University of Melbourne in 2002, and a 1,000 People Program Fellowship in Tianjin, China in 2018. A self-taught diorama builder and an avid cyclist, Pagel is a 7-time winner of the California Triple Crown.
Yes.
Thanks for that, Seth. But most of all, thanks for the nudge that got me to organize the It's All About the Benjamin show. This was a show born of an opportunity that just presented itself when Seth shot over an email and said, we're doing a Complications in Colors show at the museum. Would you want to do a Benjamin show at about the same time? And I said, yes. I will do almost anything to spend more time with the Carl Benjamin painting because it makes my life richer. So when Carl stopped teaching at Pomona and became an emeritus faculty member, he was, all emeritus faculty members would get an office, and Carl traded his in perpetuity office for a storage room. And in that storage room, it's chock-a-block full of his paintings. So I went over there, and it was like a kid in a candy shop, just pulling paintings, pulling paintings, pulling paintings. And what I wanted to, so first I just looked at everything, and then I thought, there's so many great things here. If I try to cover everything, it's going to be chaotic. So really quickly, I decided to do show Carl's serial work. He did a lot of one-offs, but for the most part of his life, he worked in series, where he would develop a format, set up that format, do X number of variations within that format, and then stop and move on to another one. And it's really different. It's a different way of thinking than a body of work. To me, bodies of work form after they happen. And you can say, oh yeah, that's when the artist kind of finished up with that, and they moved over to that. But Carl would do his intentionally from the start. And to me, if you're looking at a serial painter's work, you really need to have a bunch of each one. So I picked 7 series made from 1970 to 1993, and had mostly 4 examples of each, and just lined them up in the galleries chronologically. So what I loved seeing that is like, within one series, you would see Carl's thought process and going from one to another, and then between and among the series, you'd see another thought process developing from that. And I was really interested in that kind of internal-external relationship between the series, and I think that also takes place in individual paintings. And some of the most of the works in the show were squares. The ones with made up of 4 triangles making up one little square. Carl sets up like 4 or 5, sometimes even more, different types of symmetry in the painting, where there's bilateral symmetry, there's horizontal symmetry, there's also like one quadrant will flip to go to the other quadrant, or 2 rows will flip to go to 2 other rows. And the thing that I love about Carl's work is it's basically made up of 2 ingredients. There's color and structure. So in a way, it's not complicated at all. It's really, really simple. But in that simplicity, he gets, to me, an infinite range of things. And I love that the color, for me, draws me in and really provides a lot of sensual, physical, bodily satisfaction. And then the structure is more of a kind of a cat and mouse mental game I play to try to figure out what decisions he was making to put together this composition. And I think it's like, I don't think any other artist does that. I think it's unique to Carl and the way he would make different parts relate to other parts. So to me, it's like part of a painting is itself and something else. And I think that that's a really interesting way of thinking about singularity or identity or groups or collectives. And I think it outdistances just about any kind of structural thinking to come out of New York in the 50s and 60s. And I think it makes him a uniquely California painter. Thanks.
Nice.
That's a good, oh, did I hear the close there. I didn't mean to cut off the topic. So maybe you could just like keep going on my next question of
I'm done.
oh shoot of just like what's the significance of hard edge? And I've talked to people about it. It's kind of hard to explain how radical. If I'm talking to like high school students, you're like, in the 1950s, like this was a total break. So it was a break from abstract expressionism, but also artists like Carl who were in Claremont working with Millard Sheets and Gene Ames. It was a total, break from that style too. So yeah, just like at hard edge as a very like Southern California invention, like what was significant and what
I guess
you're interested in.
one of the things that I love about them is kind of like how social or how public they are. To me, it's not the kind of art where you go look at the work to figure out the artist's psyche or the artist's past or history or story or subconscious or whatever. And I think that was cooking a lot in AbX. And I think that Carl thought like, okay, they've done that. That's actually a little self-involved, a little narcissistic, a little touchy-feely, and instead went for something that was aimed toward the public, aimed towards a social space. And I find it like people that do that to be pretty generous, or the work to be generous. I also think you don't need to be a rocket scientist or a nerd or a professional curator to figure out this stuff. I think it has a really inclusive, come one, come all feel to it. So I think there's a democratic appeal to it. And I think it maybe happened here and not anywhere else because I think at the time Carl was working, New York was the center of the art world. California was like coming into its own, but that was Los Angeles. He was out of New York, and he was also out of Los Angeles. He was in the Inland Empire before he even had a name. And I think that at that time, artists were making work for each other and not for an audience, not for institutions, not for a critical establishment. To me, there's just more freedom involved to make something you want to look at.
Not for Instagram either.
No.
Yeah. Alex, how do you think about this, hard edge work, and do you still see it as relevant and influencing, being an abstract painter these days?
It's a very good question, and I like that you were talking about how Carl was, when he was making this work, he was thinking about AbX painters and how their work feels, I agree, narcissistic, touchy-feely. What was the third word you used? It was really good. I was trying to log those points in my mind.
It's recorded.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll go back. But I think when I make work that, I actually didn't know this work until you showed it to me. So it's interesting always to see a lineage of painting that I'm not aware of and that I'm directly referencing as I'm working. The whole time I've been working, I've always been interested in working very flat and graphically, and wasn't aware before I moved to Los Angeles that there is a large history of this painting here. And so it's been nice to sort of, see that there's relatives, I guess, in the room with me as I'm making my work. And it's been a slow slog to try and find painters who work similarly as I do and who share a visual language. But I think initially thinking about, I didn't talk about this. There were so many things I didn't talk about with my work, so I was trying to go really fast because I was aware of the time. But I do like thinking about working with constraints in my studio. It doesn't always turn out like Carl's work, where there's like 5 paintings that are really strictly following a set of instructions he laid out for himself. I sort of spin out a little bit more. But I always start from that. I'm deeply interested in structure. I think that's because I came from the San Francisco Art Institute, which had one of the only new genre programs. That and Cal Arts. And a lot of the art that I first looked at when I was in undergrad wasn't painting, it was video, performance, and text-based work, and that still tends to be my most favorite work. And coming back to the lineage that I'm working in and these artists I'm finding, the whole time that I was in school, I never could quite find anyone that would be interested in speaking the language that my work was using until I ended up at UCLA working with Larry Pittman. I would argue that he is a hard-edge painter, but he probably would not even call himself a painter. I think he thinks that he's an artiste or an artist first, but sorry, I think I'm rambling a little bit, but I find it's such a pleasure to see that this work exists, to know that there are people who've come before me that have worked in this specific way, especially in the place that I've always wanted to live and now I do live in. And yeah, I don't know if it's relevant. That's a crazy question. I mean,
Just say yes.
yes.
Yes or no question.
Because I had seen that question before and I was like, is it relevant? I don't know what is relevant. Like, the world feels so chaotic and so, like, everything is relevant. I don't know if that's the correct answer.
That is the correct
but
answer.
Tonight it is.
And I want to talk more about also like LA kind of art history versus New York. But before we jump ahead on that, just like in general, like Rachel, so, some of your earlier work, you were known for, appropriating specific artworks.
Is it on?
It's on.
Oh,
I don't use the word appropriation.
oh,
I
what
use,
word do you use?
Translation.
Okay, so you're like translating, literally.
Not
forms of-
literally. I look at, examine things and then sort of decide what I want to change about it. So it's not a duplication.
Right.
It's a radical change into something completely different.
Right, yeah. But, well,
Sorry to argue with you.
no, I appreciate it. But you were referencing
Yeah.
specific artworks, right? And I think you still do that some of your work, but like the work in our show isn't, direct reference. It's more
Yes,
kind of.
I mean, I'm usually on the hunt for something, right? I'm operating. I think of myself as a conceptual artist, and so I think when I was younger, I was on the hunt to expose a sort of an imbalanced art world structure where, the patriarchal system was privileging patriarchy. And now I'm on the hunt for other things. I think that that's in my work already. It's laden with the materials I'm employing. So it allows me to examine other things like the structure of a flower or, the physics or the pigment particles. So when I was on the hunt for examining pigment particles, well, they're already hard edge. So they're going to have those structural shapes. And I do like that, but not everything I examine is a hard edge discussion. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So how do you come up with structures? You kind of reference like some of the scientific underpinnings or
Those pieces that were the plexiglass filled with pigment, those are abstracted enlarged pigment particle shapes. So there's an abstraction I didn't direct, the yellow one isn't an exact enlargement of a yellow pigment particle. But there's something I'm drawing from, changing it, and then sort of moving forward. I don't know if that makes sense. And then there are some things where, like the particles of light, the triangles that were in the pan, the large pan. my goal was only the structures that hold the pigment that I've been using. That's it. It's going to have nothing else but the welds that hold that together. So those shapes were are we still on the, I drifted, are we still on the hard edge?
It's complicated.
That's
the idea.
now I'm rambling.
No, and you know, I wanted to like have this panel kind of like coming at, you know, these different ideas from like all these different angles, because I feel like that's, you know, when you're learning in art history, like art history class, everything's, you know, kind of leaning towards a clean linear narrative, you know, but then once you start to learn about, you know, Terry O'Shea, you know, his connection to like Surfer magazine, you know, it's like, it's not all so simple. And so Dave, like, talk about like your experience with like Chenard Foundation and like Frederick, like your kind of, you know, interactions with Frederick Hammersley or discovering his work. And I was reading when there's an online interview of when you interviewed him, and I was learning that he had started out as a sign painter, and you have training as a sign painter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I was really lucky enough through the Chenard Foundation to meet and become friends with Frederick Hammersley. To try to keep it brief, Carl Benjamin, Fred, Lorcer Feidelson, and John McLaughlin really were the four people that forwarded hard edge, West Coast hard edge painting, and they were part of a show called Four Abstract Classicists, 1959. Okay, so this show was not very well received, but it was all hard edge painting. And what's funny is I didn't know Carl Benjamin, but Fred would talk about Carl Benjamin a lot, and I think they were similar. They had a kind of scientific approach. Fred was like this really gentle, soft-spoken, kind guy who helped completely demolished abstract expressionism and this whole subconscious, emotional, gestural way of painting that really occupied most of the 20th century, I would say. And the profound thing that happened there with these kind of unlikely revolutionaries is that for all these decades, you know, serious painting, you know, abstract painting was kind of this subconscious thing, gestural, and essentially it was an unplanned event, right? It just came out of you. And you know, I like AE, trust me. I think there's an energy and a character to it that I love. But I am kind of interested in the demolition of like orthodoxies and how and why that happens. And so these things emerge, and then another generation or era comes and just demolishes it into something else. And it was very interesting to me that this demolition occurred at the hands of these very gentle, scientific guys.
Suburban dudes.
Yeah, they you know, Frederick would teach class in a suit and tie,
That's cool.
right?
Yeah.
And he was extremely soft-spoken. But here's where it gets very interesting. That was 1959. So the whole emergence of like West Coast pop, which became New York, really, came right during and after that. And so the essential thing that happened was art orthodoxy went from being an unplanned, gestural, subconscious, emotional thing to a planned thing. It flipped 180 degrees, just like that, right around that time. And then West Coast hard edge kind of, I mean, Frederick kept doing it, Carl Benjamin kept doing it, Lorcer Feidelson, they all kept doing it. but the movement was kind of wiped out by West Coast pop. But West Coast pop employed the exact same sort of philosophical underpinnings, which is, it was planned. The work was planned. And then I guess you could kind of start projecting into conceptualism and postmodernism, which to me looks like, at that point, was like a detonation of thought, and then it's just exploded. And that's where we are to this day. There hasn't really been any structured orthodoxy since. It's just been exploding and exploding ever since. But I just look at that moment. I was born in 1960, so I wasn't part of it, but I think that was a very crucial thing that happened right then with these people and with their thought process.
So now I want to jump into that idea of like LA art history, you know, in contrast to the New York art history, and kind of along some of these lines of like, you know, Light and Space was utilizing a lot of the materials of aerospace, and you know, so you're talking about, is it polyurethane wheels on the urethane
Yeah.
wheels on the skateboards? You know, so there's like these you know, plastics and commercial innovations, and you know, you got like fetish of you know, these artworks that are maybe sometimes not taken as seriously because they're like beautiful and pleasurable and shiny. But I wanted to hear from you guys just on like ideas of like materiality and like commercial materials. Like Rachel, you know, you started to talk about like using commercial cosmetic materials and how some people, you know, there's like hierarchies, and Alex, you know, you're using kind of like digital processes where it's a little bit more removed, right? Kind of like that I feel like the kind of a California cool sensibility. But Rachel, do you want to start and just talk about like art and kind of commercial materials, and maybe like in this Southern California atmosphere? How does that play in?
I lived and worked in both New York and LA, and for me, the big difference was that in New York, the dealers controlled everything. And artists, it was like the dealers were, you know, the people that ride in cabs, and artists rode the subways. And, you know, there was just this clear ranking of human beings and where you were. Whereas in LA, when I got out of art school, artists' opinions mattered. And I was blown away that art dealers would sit down with you and, you know, say, who do you think is good? What's going on? Ask, you know, they would ask artists their opinion as if they valued it, not as if you're not in my rank. And to me, that was everything. I was like, this place has space, there are possibilities. The people that run things are interested in helping and hearing from the people that they're showing. And that's all that mattered to me. I know that from going from city to city, whether it's in Europe or in the United States, the artists of that area are the artists that everybody talks about. So in New York, everybody talks about New York artists. In LA, everybody talks about LA. So there is a different characterization of LA hard edge painting. But as I said before, I think of myself as a conceptual artist, and the milieu of people that I hung out with make work out of all different things. I do know it's easier to procure materials on the West Coast. On the East Coast, I was having to buy massive amounts of stuff and get it shipped, and the sexism and all that was really hard to deal with. So for me, LA was cool in that your opinion mattered, And, people wanted to see what, came about from the materials you were using. And I was able to get deformalization of highly coveted material cosmetics, in LA. There's no way anyone in New York would have given me their breakdown of how they come up with their products. So, yeah, the secret sauce. It's just so for me it was inclusion. LA meant inclusion to me.
So, yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
you mentioned aerospace, so you're talking about, aluminum, you have the surfboard industry, you got resin, you have resin art. This stuff is all connected. And, LA has the long days, the climate. I think it provided an incredible laboratory kind of situation for people, especially in the 50s and 60s. There was a lot of room. I mean, out here was a lot of, probably still farmland, right? So you had Carl Benjamin out here. He didn't care about anything other than his thing. And it's it's great hearing what you have to say, because I know Fred and how he thought, and now I know a lot more about Carl Benjamin, and I can imagine why being out in the country would be a great place for him. But what was your other question? You had something else that sparked.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It was just about materiality, or like commercial materials.
Yeah,
And
it's so
incorporated.
available and
Yeah.
cheap. Everything was, nothing's cheap anymore, but being produced for industry, you could buy scraps. I was starting out buying cut-offs of plexiglass material that they were, cut off.
Thrown away.
Yeah, they were throwing it away. I'd go look at the trash bin when I didn't have any money. And, you could find nice, large pieces, plenty large to be a painting. So, anyways, prevalence, space, all this stuff plays into it.
So Alex, you went to UCLA, but you kind of stuck around since then. So do you want to just talk about like what attracted you to SoCal as an artist? And
Yeah, sure. When I lived in San Francisco, a lot of my friends were from Los Angeles, so I would visit a lot. I had my very good friend, her father had a house in Laurel Canyon, huge, with mosaic tiles all over the place that he hand cut and laid in the home. And I thought, if this is LA, I want to live here. This is amazing. And I was a little disappointed when I moved in 2017 and ended up paying the most amount of money in my whole life for a one-bedroom in Brentwood. My mom insisted that I live in Brentwood as a single woman, which was an interesting experience. But I wanted to move to LA because there was this fantasy of space. When I lived in San Francisco, I was always enamored with the light. So I stuck around. I was also sort of threatened by a few of my professors to not leave. I always have the escape of going to Germany because my husband is German. But I love it here. I have always wanted to live here. I just feel so this is cheesy. I feel very connected to Los Angeles, even though I'm not from here. As an artist, you generally have to live in Los Angeles or New York if you're trying to hack it as a young artist, as I am. And I just never could see myself living in New York. I need, the space, the light. It's all very important to me. As for materials, I stumbled into using the vinyl cutter as a stencil for my work. Before the vinyl cutter, I would take large pieces of masking tape, project onto the masking tape, draw everything out by hand, and then cut it. And I'm a pretty stubborn person, and I don't change my working process that quickly. And I had a few people say, why don't you start using a vinyl cutter so you can work a little quicker? Because I would be making 6 paintings in a year. None of them are up here, but all of the work for my thesis I made over a long period of time. So when I started using the vinyl cutter, I found that all of the materials that I need to make all of this are so easily accessible because there's a lot of this material is used for screen printing, and there's a huge screen printing industry in Los Angeles because of the textile industry, because of the clothing industry. So the vinyl cutter arrived at my door in one day, direct from Mick Logan. Mick Logan, they probably have half of their business because of me. I'm always ordering from them, and they still refuse to give me discounts. They're such jerks. But I ended up at the vinyl cutter purely on accident, and I'm not very good with technology, but I pretend to be. I know what I need to do what needs to get done. But yeah, you can buy anything in Los Angeles. It's really amazing. It's such a materialistic city, which is also why I love it. And I love then, the dichotomy of how beautiful it is. So I've always really appreciated how, in one sense, how, false materialistic it is, and then in the other, how goddamn beautiful it is.
So, David, as an art historian, how do you see like that LA versus New York kind of, contrast, like through the lens of color?
Yeah, to me, there's more anything goes color here, and there's more synthetic color. I think it has something to do with the light in Los Angeles. A lot of people say, oh, do that, make it silly, but it's actually, to me, it's because the desert meets the ocean, and interesting things happen with the light there. There aren't many major metropolitan centers in those places, so it's a special moment. But I think they also, like, LACMA didn't have a standalone building until the 1960s. We were really kind of a town without an institutional support structure like New York had. So for me, it was always artists hanging out in their packs or their gangs, talking to each other, making stuff, and it wasn't connected to a critical establishment or a collecting establishment or an institutional establishment. And so it was like kind of what you said, is artists talking to artists and dealers wanting to talk to artists because they generate there. And I think that, to build on what you said, Rachel, too, I think that the art in LA was organized around schools, and schools had a lot more power. To me, it was like if you were an artist in New York, as soon as you got successful, you'd quit teaching, because teaching is what loser artists did. In LA, it was the opposite. If you became successful, you'd keep teaching because it was this link to a kind of an organic community and a group of people to talk to. And we never had that kind of sell it snobbery like New York has, where it's like, oh, you still teach? Well, why can't you sell your work? And LA was like, no, I'm Mike Kelly, and I make expensive work, and I teach. And to me, there's like mannerist color in Los Angeles is more embraced, and to me, that's like something that pushes things to extremes, that looks at what colors had happened before, and then takes it one step further. So I think of like LA as a kind of a great mannerist color town.
So I want to do some questions, if anybody has any questions from the audience. But a question that I want to ask, but not have you guys answer, is is LA have too many museums now? Are
No.
we getting to that?
No.
No.
Yeah, name them.
You mean too much color?
No. Well, we got the Lucas Museum opening up. We got so many museums. But I'm letting people think about their questions. So does anybody have any questions for the panelists?
How about galleries? Do you have enough galleries? No?
Need
No.
more.
No. Yeah, we need to find more collectors to visit them. They're closing. A lot of them are closing.
But collectors, they operate separately from galleries.
The galleries need collectors.
But it's crazy, like, I mean, it's all the small to mid-size galleries are just like, it's kind of an impossible game anymore, right?
There's a lot of artists here.
Yeah.
A lot of them are trying to make a living from it. It's a lot of art to sell. You need people to buy it. So who's going to buy it? That's a question. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, like, New York had the stock market, that whole
Right.
community, right? They had to purchase art they were buying their culture to fill in their expensive spaces. And I mean, this is something I think, I don't know, it's not like a fact or anything, but the Hollywood is our industry, and for Hollywood, like, Brad Pitt doesn't need to buy a symbol, he is the symbol, right? Or Angelina Jolie doesn't need to buy a symbol, she is the symbol. So they often go, who is the comedian that bought, it's an older comedian, he did The Jerk.
Steve Martin.
Steve Martin bought, but like they don't buy. They usually get into architecture, and because it doesn't compete with their symbol. So that's a little bit of a problem that we have on the left coast, I think.
One thing to say about that real quick is over in LA, on the West Coast, we have real estate. So you find that really the big collectors, they're into real estate, but they don't buy unless the interest rates are down. Right?
I don't know, I've never checked it.
I mean, look at, they refinance, cheap interest rate, they have free cash now. And they're paying less money than they were paying before. And that's where a lot of collections are built, is on that economy. When the rates go up, they stop. They're rich for a reason. They're smart with money. So they don't do that. We're in that cycle now where the rates are basically pretty high. They were even higher. And it usually coincides on the West Coast with the destruction of the art world at that particular sequence of time, because largely they're the buyers.
I wanted to add to yours, Rachel, about about what you thought, like, Brad doesn't buy art because he is art. And I think that that's totally true. And Patty Ford years ago said, LA doesn't have a history of philanthropy.
Yeah.
And zero, it's like we're like on the East Coast, like part of being a successful citizen is being on a board somewhere. You have this like lifetime of going up and being on boards. And Patty would take it further, and she would say, like, if you're slaughtering hogs in Chicago, you need to wash up and put a tux on and go to the symphony and go to the museum because you want to do something civilized. If you're building steel in Pittsburgh, you want to support the symphony and the orchestra and the ballet and the museums because you don't just want to be a dirty steel worker or owner of a steel factory all day. But then Patty would say, but in LA, we have the movie industry, and they think that what they make is art, so they don't need to buy any or support any. And I think there's something true to that. And we don't have philanthropists like old city. So part of that, for me, part of the upside of LA was not having that institutional support structures. There was more freedom for artists. The downside is you don't have the philanthropy side.
I just have one thing to add about Brad Pitt. He actually has a ceramic studio in Frogtown that he shares with Thomas Hasego.
Okay,
So he's making art.
oopsie.
He doesn't need
Sorry,
it.
Brad.
Well,
And Jim Carrey, full-on studio artist. Yeah, okay. Next question.
I have a question. I find it curious that in order to define Southern California's perspective, that you are referring to New York, why the comparison and not just talk about like, why do you feel a need to compare Los Angeles to New York? We're talking, I thought that this was also going to be about Southern California, not just about all of California, because I think there's something unique about Southern California that the rest of the state
It's
doesn't
still
care. So
catching up with.
I'm looking for something specific to Southern California because I feel like it's such a special place. And why do we even have to speak about New York? That's, I guess, my main question. In order to define California, why is that so?
Yeah, well, I suppose that's my fault.
Yeah.
No, but, you know, part of it was looking at, you know, starting from Hard Edge as being this such a break from what was just a, you know, everywhere at the time of abstract expressionism, which had kind of centered in New York, but had, you know, kind of gone everywhere. So yeah, but I don't know, thoughts on like, and talking about it as a, you know, Southern California phenomenon. But yeah, you know, comparing like LA to San Francisco would be, that's a whole other conversation, but you used to live in San Francisco, you said?
Years ago.
Okay.
I don't really know. I think there's a lot of social practice that happens in San Francisco. That's a big part of the city's arts culture. I think I'm not very involved. I know the MoMA had a huge expansion. It was quite different when I lived there. But I think often there's comparison, especially with painting, because New York is still the center of the art world after, I think, World War II, World War I. And there's always been a little bit of an inferiority complex to being a part of Los Angeles art world. I think not so much anymore. It's such an international art city, but there's this idea that if you were in Los Angeles, like Mike Kelly, Paul McCarthy, you were making a statement because you could probably move to New York and become way more known and make way more money. So there was probably a very specific reason why you were staying in Los Angeles or Southern California. I can't speak to the rest of California. I mean, I think the weather, I hate to see this, but I think the weather is a little bit nicer in the Bay Area, but that's my...
It's nicer here.
I don't know, I like it a little colder, but, you know, in the summer it's a little tough on my body. But, yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I just want to add that I think that LA is the center of the art world in terms of production, that more art is made here. And I think New York is the center of the art world for consumption. I think that that's where more work is bought. So I think it's like you have to look at the whole thing. But I think it's that there's way more interesting artists working here making stuff than any other city I've ever been to.
Go Dodgers.
I was just wanting to follow up with that. I agree, and there are New York artists now that have their scene here, right? They make work and spend time here, and then sell it in New York. Yeah.
Because now Manhattan's Disneyland.
And San Francisco compares itself to Los Angeles, and Los Angeles compares itself to New York.
The argument goes back a long time, and the other thing is there has been a sort of pilfering out of Los Angeles to New York too, that isn't really illuminated very often. Like Ed Ruscha is, well, he's from Oklahoma, but he's basically an LA artist. But he really emerged out of New York when he finally really broke through, right, with Gagosian and I think Leo Castelli Gallery. But so New York will sort of hijack things out of Los Angeles and then make it a New York thing, I think.
Now, I want to say one last thing. When you were talking about Mike Kelly, and he was one of my teachers at Cal Arts, and at that time, every single person would pack their bags when they graduated and go to New York, right? That's what you did.
Yeah.
You went to school in LA and you packed your bags and moved to New York.
To succeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
With Baldessari, right?
Yeah.
All right, one more question, Carrie.
There's a question for Rachel.
I was so attracted when I first saw your work in the gallery, all the cosmetics. I love cosmetics, and I have been dazzled by their beauty and uniformity. And I'm imagining that as an artist, there was a time before you used the cosmetics as a medium. And what was your trigger? Was there a trigger? I mean, you told me about some conceptual
My mother
things.
was a feminist, and she never wore cosmetics. And I remember asking her, I don't understand why you guys are all burning your bras. You still wear them. I just don't get it. And to make her mad, I would tell her, I'm going to be a cheerleader. And she was, you will not do that. And so, because cosmetics were like, not really thought highly of in my house. But to me, those companies know what they're doing. They make them sparkle, and they make this, they make it look good. And part of the reason why women like cosmetics is because their beauty in the past was sometimes their only way to acquisition power. And so the cosmetic industries know that too. Right, so they want you to keep buying it. They want you to feel bad about yourself, to keep buying it in order, and they're selling power, is what they're selling, and women buy it because they want to maintain a sense of power.
I have to add another question to that. Cosmetics are really expensive. How in the world did you
I buy, that's why I needed to learn the chemical compounds. So I buy, like, when I'm making the lipstick, I buy like lanolin, buy like a big barrel, right? And like I buy all the parts. I buy things by the kilo, and then I find I'm basically like a private label, and then I find like people that have the milling machines that I need to mill the lipstick, and then I say, well, this is my compound, this is my structure, this is what the end result I want. And then I take that product and remake it even more in my studio. So I had to become a chemist, but it was because of this idea of the hunt for the kill, right? Like to get that, this is the idea, this is something I'm interested in, this is something I want to nail or move towards it. I'm okay if I move off the map and don't do anything near what I had planned, but I usually, I get interested in something. I want to make something and see if I can do it.
And
thank you for the question.
Yeah, and what I'm fascinated by with the cosmetics is there's this a rainbow of colors, but it's all connected to the body. Like that's always the reference point that I think is just a really fascinating kind of layer of your work.
Yeah, and there's rarely any rendered bodies in the work. Right. It's I do like abstraction, and I do like hard edge as well as expressionism, or all the various different forms of abstraction. And it's like a choice. What kind of zone you want to go into. To me, but I make the choice for a reason, for whatever I'm thinking about.
All right, well, I think we're just at the ending time, so thank you so much to the panelists. Let's give them another round of applause. Thanks everybody for being here, and thanks to CGU for being great partners with us. All right, have a great night.